Hey, Internet. Alright, let's talk some Doctor Who. Particularly Season 1, Episode 7, The Legend of Ruby Sunday, written by Russell T. Davis. The penultimate episode of the series. And for those of you that do not know what the word penultimate means, because to be fair, even I didn't know until like my late 20s, so it's all good. Penultimate, I believe, is probably Latin derivative. It means second to last. So, because kind of a two-part finale. I have no idea what. We'll get to that later. Anyway, so let's start off with this one now. Because I initially, for a little bit of this episode, kind of thought it was just going to be a lot of setup and not paying off too much. Oh, it paid off a lot. Oh boy. Okay, let's get to it. Which makes the fact this episode paid off more than I thought it was going to, and I expect it mostly set up for next week's finale. Surprised. Pleasantly surprised. Very well written episode by Mr. Davis. I did it again. I'll never leave me as an American. I always look at that name in my head mentally and just, it's Davis, right? Nope. It's because it's Welsh. Anyway, back to the episode. Even though I just gave you the title. Which technically happened after the cold open, so we should talk about that first, technically. You know, Doctor Who, I can talk about things out of order. It doesn't matter, because you know what? This video, full spoilers. This is very well indicated in the thumbnail and title. So don't blame me. If you've gotten this far, it's your own fault. Anyway. The cold open was quite good, this episode. They usually are, but you know. This one I think was a good, nice high mark for the season, and for a while actually. Thinking of the series as a whole, good cold open this one. Because they end that cold open by kind of playing up the whole Susan bit of it. I think and this is from memory here from yesterday when I watched it. There's some paraphrasing. There's some lines of dialogue I think between. Gotta be between Kate, Stewart, and the Doctor. And even she would know this, I would think. No, it's gotta be from someone else. It's not Ruby, because Ruby's already aware of this information. I think it's the Doctor who points out to someone at Unit about her name being Susan. Like, why is that significant? And the Doctor responds, because my granddaughter is named Susan. Bam, cue, opening, title, music, all that junk. Good cold open. However, it's in my notes. I'd show them to you, but my handwriting's terrible and throw off the white balance. Anyway. So my literal note is they play on the Susan thing to end the cold open. Period. Next sentence. I say red herring. And I kind of said that back, I believe it was episode 2, Devil's Cord, where there's a conversation with the Doctor and Ruby, very brief scene, where they do talk about that. You have a granddaughter? That thing comes up. And people at the time that cover the Doctor Who beat, and I'm going to refer to it that way, because yeah, it's a TV show, but just like a Star Wars, per se. There isn't, or hockey, there's not really an off season. Even when the show's not airing, Doctor Who in this case, there's still news to cover. Trust me. Because I've sort of ran in those circles before of not just entertainment journalists, but people that very specifically cover just Doctor Who stuff. Because there's just like I said, it's like Star Wars. There's a whole big universe of things to talk about all the time, even when the show is not currently running. Anyway, I bring that up because, yeah, a lot of people in the Doctor Who community, they do report on everything. There was some people, not everyone, some. I won't say who. I'm not going to call anyone out. Because I was going to be a long list, be a whole separate video of various outlets and authors and creators I could call out on this one. Because a lot of people made a big deal of the whole Susan thing getting referenced in that episode. Again, I believe it was Devil's Cord. Maybe episode 3, but whatever. Which was, no, because episode 3 was Boom. I don't think it got referenced. No, anyway. I think it was Devil's Cord. It got referenced. Some people made a huge deal of it, like how this is going to tie in to all this stuff. Even I said at the time, go back and look at the video. In fact, for normally something like this, when I stick up the recommended, there's 2 of them. One of them I just leave up to the algorithm of like whatever it recommends for the viewer. It's fine. The other one, the top one that goes up there on top, that's the one I handpick that one for a video. And for a Doctor Who review, I usually just put the last episode that aired previously. In this case, I am going to I'm going to put the Devil's Cord review I did up there. I might look at it myself again, so I can go back and look at, like, yeah, I remember, maybe, you know what, maybe in the video after that, I may have been reacting to something, and boom, maybe talk. Who knows, at some point, there'll be a playlist for this season. You can go find it. Earlier in the year, I called out that I did kind of think this Susan thing was a red herring. Even though I was the one sitting there looking at all the episodes, like, what's the consistent theme that seems to keep coming up? Family, okay. Maybe there's something to the Susan thing. It didn't feel right. From the writer in me was like, no, something with this too on the nose. And same thing with the Susan thing. I didn't watch any of these videos, but in my YouTube feed, since again algorithms are algorithms, I do watch. I don't watch a ton of Doctor Who stuff, but I do watch some of just little lore and breakdown videos on YouTube because it's the kind of thing I like. I remember when the full trailer for this episode came out, people were losing their minds over the Susan thing. Because, yeah, we all, and I mean, it was fairly obvious from the little teaser next time on from last week. Yeah, we all got the S-triad technology. We got the whole, yeah, it's a TARDIS anagram. Like, that's obvious. It's too obvious, as we'd find out. Again, spoilers. You know what? Instead of spoilers, I'm assuming you know what happens, but in case you don't, let's go on the journey a little bit. I don't have the whole episode. It's not like a hockey game where because there aren't goals to note. Anyway, let's move on. As we're back at Unit, we get the return of Mel, which is nice. I haven't seen her since the 60th, and she had just a little small, kind of, a little bigger expanded role in this episode for Mel, so nice to see. Working undercover with the Unit to infiltrate, Susan, whatever her actual last name was. I misquoted myself and I was quoting someone else. Chain of misquotes. That her full name was Susan Twist. I think I also at some point kind of misspoke, and I mentioned where she popped that character. This woman had popped up in episodes, and I mentioned her. I think is Ruby's neighbor-ish sort of thing, who you see in this episode when Ruby gets called in a unit, and then since Rose, Donna's daughter Rose, not Rose Tyler, she's in a whole other parallel universe still. In this point in time. With the other human clone of the 10th Doctor. You know, if you know your Doctor Who history, yeah, it gets kind of wacky when you talk about it out of context like that. Anyway, there's a whole joke made about with Ruby and meeting Rose, and something along the lines of Ruby saying, "Oh, your mom," because like Donna, like, "Oh, your mom works for the unit. I'm bringing my mom in too." Which kind of becomes a little bit of a joke in the thing. I'm not going to reference them. I don't even bring it up. No, I don't remember. Anyway, sorry, I ain't had time to read over my notes yet. Usually I do that before I record, so I have some prep for what I'm going to talk about. Because really, these are just talking points, so I can keep kind of on track. See how well that goes. Anyway, Um, we get, anyway. There's also talk at unit about, or when the doctor's at unit, then open early scenes about. He tells unit about the snow thing with Ruby. Like, no, actual proper snow that happens sometimes when she's around. And as the best the doctor can figure it out, whatever happened, and he does refer to at one point in this episode, does refer to that night of Ruby's birth and being dropped off at the church, and that whole moment as being a fixed point in time. It's not discussed yet in the current soft reboot era how the doctor understands the differences between a fixed point and a non-fixed point. That hasn't been gone over yet in the exposition, but older school fans, not old school like Classic Who, previous reboot era of New Who, 2005 to close to present, we know what he's talking about there. He can't do anything about it, and he does kind of reference it. They get to that in a different way in this episode. Where he says something along the lines of, it's such a powerful moment of whatever happened in that moment that, yeah, going back there is far too risky. And then again, it's brought up in that episode of like, yeah, but you're the doctor. You break the rules that you made for yourself. You break those rules all the time. Although, remember, the doctor's on this a couple times in the modern series, but most notably, I would think people reference this, have been referencing this throughout, not on the show, but people talking about the show, have been referencing this kind of all season about the Father's Day episode from the original Series 1 reboot with the Ninth Doctor and Rose. And how that was the time when he took her back to see her father when he was still alive, the day he died, so she could meet it, and then we get the whole time wraiths thing, and a bunch of bad stuff happens. Those are probably the most severe consequences we've seen for the Doctor sort of breaking the rules and then breaking the rules again within that episode and crossing his own timeline after they already screwed up the first time. So there's that. So yeah, double bad. But even again, this episode is supposed to work on both levels for the audience that remembers and knows that episode, for example, and an audience that has no idea the consequences potentially. So they try to Davis did best to kind of walk on that line. I think it still serves better for audiences that kind of know the inherent dangers. Maybe there was some more exposition set up that just got cut for time. Who knows? But all of that leads to the Doctor asking you a very interesting question about, do you have a time window? And I think Kate Stewart or someone else responds with, you told us very explicitly in the 1970s to never build one of those things. Beat, of course we have one. It's on the 10th floor. So I do wonder, it's in my notes here, a time window, air quotes, hash old reference, just because they noted the time period. And I didn't have time to look this up. I kind of wanted to. I only watched one little kind of review reaction thing that Theory's put up, because he puts this stuff up super early, despite being in the UK. I'm pretty sure he uses a VPN to just watch the American release at I think it's 7 Eastern on Friday nights. Even I don't watch it that early. I wait till Saturday, out of tradition. I just got to this one late Saturday, so hence the video being made on Sunday. But you know what? It's the Legend of Ruby Sunday. Kind of works out, doesn't it? Anyway, I do wonder, though. I didn't look it up. Theories didn't reference it. I'm sure by now, it being Sunday, there's some videos pointing out, here's all the Easter eggs and references in this episode. I should go watch one of those to see if either during the John Pertwee or Tom Baker era, which would both be the 70s, if they ever reference that time window thing. Because I want to see if that was actually a nice, very obscure callback. Maybe, maybe not. Either way, so we go down to the time window room, which once they get it on and running, because they get hooked up to the old VHS tape that they have of the CCTV footage, the visuals for that are very cool. I like the way it looked a lot. Because it did kind of, this has to be shot in the volume, I would think. Just because it did look so good. It doesn't look like a chroma key green. I think you get issues with chroma key. That's why stuff like the volume was invented, just to get rid of some of those issues with I say chroma key, like everyone knows what it is. Green screen. It's just I'm using the technical term. Chroma key is the technical term because you're isolating a color and then keying it out and all that junk. Anyway, yeah, this looked like it was probably shot on volume. So I guess there's one over in England somewhere now, which there have been rumors of for a bit, and there still are. I haven't nailed it down. Don't care. Either way, I was gonna say the visuals on that. Once it was the time window is fully like on and that whole sequence is going, great stuff. Both again the visuals, I like the way it looked, like that black and white grainy VHS background that was there, and whatnot. And we get some really interesting plot beats throughout this. And some interesting lines from the Doctor, some of which I wrote down as quotes because they ended up being significant in this episode, and I think they're going to be significant next week and possibly in the future going forward. So, hence why it's like I do all these this note taking in real time. Like I pause the episode to take a note. I should, but have it. I don't want to break up the flow. One of the things the Doctor says, because during the time window of like playback, they can kind of just watch this moment in like a 3D space, because you intersect with the events from the Christmas special with the goblins and all that, and again the introduction, technically, officially, of Ruby, in that episode. Because the stuff in the TARDIS shows up, and as the Doctor points out, despite everything else around them being kind of grainy fuzzy, the TARDIS is still that, but it's a bit sharper and a bit clearer, interestingly enough. Which starts the Doctor on this thought process, and one of the things he spits out, just sort of off the top of his head, probably without thinking about it, just talking out loud, I would assume. He says, "Time is remembered. Memory is time." And there's some other lines that says, "What is the memory of a time machine?" He's kind of asking himself these questions. He's never thought about it. But in my opinion, this is in my notes too, before anything else in the episode happened, by the way. In my notes immediately, after the Doctor says that stuff about time is memory, or time is remembered, memory is time, and then what's the memory of a time machine, I wrote equals, this is memory TARDIS from the 60th. Not in the 60th specials proper, but if you're in the world of Doctor Who, around the 60th, there's a bunch of extra stuff they did, just as with the 50th, and just as will be with future stuff. For the 60th anniversary, they did a lot of small side kind of mini one-off couple minute things with a bunch of old previous Doctors and companions inside on a set they were calling the Memory TARDIS. And the first one of those kind of explains what it is, sort of. I actually want to go back and look at that again now after these lines, because I have a feeling this episode and some of the events of it may be what created that Memory TARDIS. Again, in perfect Doctor Who fashion, we see a thing, don't really get a great explanation, and then like a year later, here we'll explain sort of how this works. And yes, at this point I will bring up the little bit of controversy / leaks, spoilers. Who knows, honestly, at this point, because I didn't watch the series trailer. I think I watched like once. I didn't look at it and break it down. Other people did, and other people pointed out there's a shot in that trailer. Upon its initial release, it got changed pretty quickly. That's why people are suspicious. I'm not as much. Of a shot like in space, the Doctor and the TARDIS opening the doors, and the background behind him is not his regular TARDIS interior. It's the interior of the Memory TARDIS that we saw involved around the 60th anniversary stuff, especially the side stuff they were doing with previous Doctors and Companions thing. And it became controversial because, again, people saw that trailer, went frame by frame, saw that shot, and was like, why is that the memory TARDIS? When is that? Like, assuming it was going to come into play. I am a little more skeptical of that. Because I know that that shot is just a background image insert off a green screen. That's traditional chroma key. I know they do that effect in Doctor Who. I've seen it for a decade plus behind the scenes stuff. They've done it the same way forever. It's entirely possible, plausible, or likely that someone just stuck the wrong FX shot in there, that plate. They just used the wrong one of the two. That's probably what happened. Again, it got controversial because it got released and then it got taken down and then re-released with that shot replaced with the proper background. And I don't think it was because, spoilers. I think it was someone just screwed up. But if that was meant to be an actual shot, it's obviously going to be in next week's episode. And again, we may have seen the creation of the memory TARDIS in this episode, but there's still more to kind of cover on what happens and talking about it, so let's get back to it. I just became fascinating for me because I'm like, this is where the memory TARDIS comes from. This is its origins. Maybe, I think. Anyway. Yeah, because some interesting stuff starts happening. Again, this is full spoilers, so I'm not going to go through all of it, because I'm assuming you've seen it. But even within the video, in the recording of that, it changes. And they point that out of when the woman, mystery character, well, not just a woman. What we're assuming, people have been assuming is Ruby's mother. Birth mother, at least. I don't know where your argument for or against that is, honestly. We don't have enough information about any of this to know anything. But yeah, that figure, that mystery shrouded figure in the hood, yeah, that changes. And Ruby points that out because she mentions her and her mom, her adopted mother, who she refers to as mom, and even my notes here I refer to as her mom. She makes note, mentions they watch it every year. It's like an annual thing. And so Ruby points out that, like that person, she's assuming is her birth mother. I'm not so sure. Turning around and pointing, as she says, that never happened. So as the doctor points out, time's changing. The timelines are changing. He didn't say this, but they're in flux, obviously, because it's sort of a, wibbly wobbly. It's not, time isn't fixed. Like, whatever. I'm not going to try to explain Doctor Who time travel logic, because honestly it changes, depends on who's running the show in that era. So, it's not consistent. But either way, yeah, it's little mystery still is that mystery character. I'm not going to say woman because it's not clear. It's very, very, like, actually thinking about it, it's actually a bit of foreshadowing. Because how is the Grim Reaper typically portrayed? I mean, just take away the scythe, which actually has a different name when it was besides, I think I did have a different name. Besides scythe, for one of the gardening tools. I know, off track. Take away the scythe. Black robed, hooded figure. You can't see his face. I'm thinking about it now, it's actually kind of genius foreshadowing if there's a tie-in, which there clearly is some kind of tie-in. We'll get to that. Anyway, after that stuff happens and that junk, things start going real nuts. Or we start seeing this, I would say it starts looking like smoke. We know what it is by the end. It's actually black particles of sand that are swirling all around the TARDIS, or all around this spot. Because again, they're watching the video, Doctor comes and goes, TARDIS disappears, but in that spot, they start to detect some kind of anomaly they can see through the time window. this kind of black, nebulous, not cloud, it's, again, looks like a dust storm because it's a sandstorm, but it's all black. And it's all great monotone anyway in terms of the background, so you can't really get a color. Well, actually, you do. In that, even though it's monotone, although the Doctor and Ruby are in the time window, they're in full color, it's just the black and white around them. When that swirling cloud thing starts up in the memory window, there is some red, like, kind of background, like, almost like interior lighting for that cloud of sand that's red. And interestingly, as all that's happening, and I think even, I can't remember if it's before or after it starts speaking, that anomaly, Ruby's mom, her adopted mother, calls it the Beast. And the one character, like the guard who is locked in the time window room with them, who's going to investigate, who basically gets... We don't see it on the screen because eventually he just goes missing and no one can find him. But they are eventually able to communicate with them, even though they can't see him. And his voice seems to be coming out of the anomaly. And I think one of the questions they ask him is about where he is, what, you know, whatever, it's like that. And I think, I'm paraphrasing here in the first part, because he, like, asks his own question and answers it. He's like, where am I? Or, I ask him where he is. It's like, where am I? In hell. So, and those references of her mom, Ruby's mom, calling that anomaly thing, like, it's the Beast kind of thing. And then that guy's reference to where he's at in hell, everyone, myself included, is vibing on, that's what this has all been about. The one who waits, the oldest one, blah, blah. They're bringing the Beast back from Satan Pit, the two-parter episode. That was from the 10th Doctor era. Which was basically, aside from, I think the top running theories, the speculation about this season of The Big Mystery was, I think Trickster was number 1. Something to do with Susan was number 2. On most people's lists, I'm kind of judging on what I've seen order-wise. And then for some people, 2 or 3 is interchangeable, or 3 and 1. This was my personal guess too, was that probably related more to the Beast, aka Sutekh. Because they're kind of one and the same in the Doctor Who universe. Because the Beast, Sutekh, Satan, Devil, whatever you can want to call it, can take on many forms. So, Sutek's an example of that. We'll get to that in a second. Anyway, yeah. I have it in my notes here because we start to get as... Well, again, this episode is so well written. I need to go watch it again. It's for some of the foreshadowing with the Susan character. Because they have Mel working for her undercover at Unit as like one of her assistants on the media team. And when she's going to talk to her and calls her Susan, she's like, just call me Sue. Foreshadowing. Because the thing that... You know what happens later, I think. Unless you haven't seen it. You're watching me for... Don't watch these for recaps of what happened. Go watch the episode, then watch my thoughts about it. Because I'm not really going to do a good job of like, beat for beat. Here's what happens. I'm here to talk about what happened, not describe to you what happened. Anyway. But I do find it when Sue, we'll just refer to her that for now for reasons, when she is giving her speech, and we find out about this earlier when the Doctor is questioning her. We find out, and he starts asking her the odd question that gets her attention because how would he possibly know this? It's her dreams. It's like, do you dream of this? Being in an ambulance. Like, all the times they've crossed paths with her. Like he says to the unit when he first gets there, everywhere I go, this woman is seemingly there in some form or another, and I can't figure out why. And also the lighting changed because it's time of day. So yeah, I get to enjoy that now. You get some lovely glare off my notes, so I'll move them out of the way. I'm almost done anyway, it's fine. Although now the white balance is off, so I gotta fix that in real time. Enjoy. Oh, did I fix it? Yeah, I did. By accident. Of course, I flipped over the page of notes I actually needed. Oh, right. Well, so now I had the same problem again. I'm making a bounce car with my notebook. I'm not even trying to. Technical term there. Anyway, yeah, it's interesting. I don't know what any of this means, other than it was just how Davis chose to connect all these plot points. Was that Sue and in her dreams having these experiences, but those are being planted there by someone else, as we'll see. Because the final bit of a red herring of the whole Beast storyline, again, technically, is when Unit takes that footage from the time window and starts playing it backward. That's when they running it backwards when they see that, oh, in that big cloud anomaly thing, very clearly you can see the TARDIS highlighted red, which would explain possibly that interior red glow. Because, yeah, okay, again, we all know the reveals here. This is where, well, I'd say that the playing the tape backwards to reveal that, I think was the last sort of, I can't even say it's a red herring now about the Beast. I was expecting more traditional The Beast as opposed to Sutekh. Again, kind of the same thing. I'll get into that in a minute here. But the whole reversing the tape thing, definitely, the second they said that, I did start to make a note of it because I knew it was going to be significant. Only for the fact that now that was like our third clue in to what this was. Like, we had Ruby's mom call it the Beast directly. We had the other guy say he was in hell. And now you're playing things backwards to reveal a message. That is totally straight up old school, like, what people used to think. There was a time period, for those of you younger than me. This is even before my time. So goes way back. Goes back to the 70s, actually, ironically, which they referenced earlier with the time window. Where, yeah, there's a whole documentary out there about it, I think called Satanic Panic. I forget if that's the name of the doc, or that's what it was called at the time when kids were playing D&D. And again, there was a whole thing about taking records, vinyl records, and then playing them backwards, looking for hidden messages of demonic stuff. And they tried to do it with all these different bands and everything else. It was really stupid and dumb. There's a whole, trust me, go ahead and search the internet at your own peril about backwards masking, reverse speech stuff. All of which is nonsense, by the way. Someone who's not an English major, but probably could have been if I wanted to go get a degree. That would be one I could do in my sleep. No, there's nothing to any of that. But I find it funny, the reference of, let's run the tape backwards. Like, felt very much like that, like, oh, we're looking for proofs of Satan kind of thing. It reminded me of the running vinyls backwards and the backwards masking stuff for hidden messages, all that junk that ties into the whole people panicking about the satanic side. It was a nice little touch, I thought, that there's a way to reveal that there's a connection now that was being formed. And again, I don't know why I'm covering this. I haven't really said it too much earlier. Yeah, they have fun with the anagram thing because we all knew TARDIS was obvious. I was like, it's too obvious. Something else is going on here. And it was. As they drop the letters out and you get Sutekh and everyone's like, oh, well, not everyone. Old people that know Sutekh from classic Doctor Who. So one serial called Pyramids of Mars with Tom Baker, which I have seen in its entirety. Because I've watched chunks from every classic Who Doctor era. I've probably seen the most of Tom Baker just because he did it for 7 years, so there's the most there. But yeah, if you go through just anywhere, you do an online search for like, hey, you know, I had to write this article too. Like, here's 10 classic Doctor Who episodes, not single episodes, because they used to serialize them back then. Like, Pyramids of Mars is like 6 parts or something. They would be typically about somewhere between usually 4 and 6 part serials that would contain story. What we would call an episode now used to be much longer and split up and serialized kind of thing. That was just how classic Who was done for a long time, for decades. So yes, Sutekh is back. And I do love, it's in my notes in all caps once it's revealed. So I'm like, Sutekh, yeah, I'm so happy. Because again, that was pretty much more or less kind of, well, because once we got all these, I won't call them red herrings, they were bits of foreshadowing, just sort of foreshadowing adjacent to Sutekh. Because I really thought, again, Ruby's mom directly calling it the Beast, guy saying, backwards masking, I'm like, okay, we're really leaning into the whole Satan angle from, like, the Satan Pit episode and Beast and all that stuff, and I'm like, you could just do Sutekh, it'd be a lot simpler and potentially cleaner. And they do. And what's great is during that build-up and Sutek's little monologue as he's forming into his shape on the TARDIS, which he may now have control of, because as best I can figure, using the time window, Sutekh was able to latch on to the memory of the TARDIS and then use that to make a connection to where the TARDIS was at in present day. At least that particular TARDIS. Mind you, there are two out there. Not identical, but there are two. Because the 14th Doctor still has his, we assume, parked in the back of the Noble Temple. Or not Noble Temple. It is still Noble Temple. Yes, that joke's still going. Or was in the 60th. I think it's in their back garden. Or backyard for us Americans. Yeah, because they were at one point copies of each other, and then, 15th Doctor sort of, by the time, you've seen the 60th, so by the time he walks in, that TARDIS has already prearranged itself with its new desktop. If you go back to The Doctor's Wife, the Neil Gaiman episode, one of my favorite lines, or jokes at least, and all of that, and New Who at least, was when the TARDIS consciousness crammed into human body is Idris is talking to the 11th Doctor about all the different desktops, like the different layouts for the control room that are archived, and it's some ridiculous number. The Doctor is like, I don't have that many copies, like, or something. I'm paraphrasing, it's been a while since I've seen that episode. It's like, but or it's such a high number. The Doctor is like, but that has, you're like, you can't. You can't like catalog things that haven't happened yet, and the TARDIS Idris' response is, you can't, because the TARDIS is a life form, but its consciousness does exist outside normal time and space. So yeah, time is non-linear for the TARDIS, as they say. Idris's final words, sort of, to the Doctor at the very end of the amazing episode, because Neil Gaiman, but even for him, one of the better Doctor Who episodes. And some of Neil's better writing, in my opinion, next to like Sandman and stuff. Although everything Neil Gaiman writes is usually pretty good, but happens to be one of my favorite Doctor Who episodes. Anyway, getting off point. The end of that, the TARDIS says to him, and this is the time we talked. Because, again, it's consciousness that's living outside time and space. I'm not going to sit here and explain all the TARDIS stuff, because rabbit hole. Because it gets covered plenty in old Doctor Who. I do like, though, there's a moment in this episode when it's much easier to see it in like full color live action, as opposed to like having to put it in the black and white time window video effect. Once it's in full color and full like resolution, whatever, it's very clear, easily to tell that whirling cloud of like smokish sand and stuff is black sand. Because that's what eventually forms, like, Sutekh sort of dog head thing on top of the TARDIS. We still don't know where that's going with that. I suspect I do know where that's going, even though we didn't see a next time preview on. Anyway, I'm getting big rant here. Off topic. Because I was talking about when Sutekh is making his introduction, he mentions some of the previous antagonists we've dealt with. Like, he refers, the Trickster's the god of games and traps, and Maestro's the god of music, and, or no, sorry, I say Trickster, I meant the Toymaker. Toymaker's the god of tricks and traps, or, no, wait, oh, no, sorry, all my lines wrong. That's what happens when you watch a thing a day ago and then go from memory. As the Toymaker's the god of games, Maestro is the god of music, Trickster's the god of traps and tricks, and I think there might be something mentioned. Keyword there is that Sutekh throws Trickster in with the other two, like the other lesser in his mind gods. just to splash all the cold water on all of the running theories that Trickster was somehow the main villain behind all of this, which I never bought for a second personally, but hey, whatever. I can say that now. Everyone's like, yeah, sure. I'm like, no, I just never bought into it. I never subscribed to that theory. I'm like, whoever they're talking about, that these other people like Maestro and Timer are afraid of this other entity. It's a big deal. And yes, in that whole monologuing that Sutek does, I don't know if it's him or one of the other like kind of harbingers slash acolytes. I would say acolytes, but that's a whole different show I got to cover still. Harbingers is more fitting because that's what's used in the episode and was set up also in Devil's Cord, the Harbinger idea. So, no, but Sutek refers to himself as the god of death, which is pretty metal. And yeah, that would be the other god that all the other ones would be afraid of, because it's potentially the only god that could kill them, I would think, if they're immortal gods. But you have a god of death, maybe that's why they're afraid of him. So, but yeah, and for the record, we get no next time on. I'm sure by now maybe they put a trailer up. I'm gonna try to avoid it, not watch it. Just I don't want to see any spoilers, because this was a heck of a cliffhanger. Really good, strong end to the episode. Like I said, opening 40 minutes ago, something in my notes. Like, I thought this episode would be a lot of setup to pay off next week in that proper finale, and it wasn't. So I love being wrong and being pleasantly surprised when stuff like that does happen. And this episode, which, yeah, totally set the stage for the finale, but also gave us virtually, I'd say, like 85+% of like answering questions that have been running the entire season, the entire era of the 15th Doctor. I thought they were going to make this a bigger, longer thing. Anyway, since we're dealing non-linearly, if you go back to when I got off topic about scanning things in life form from the TARDIS being conscious, there is one point as Sutek's making the link between the memory and the time window and the present day TARDIS, when he's forming that link, they're scanning the present day TARDIS that's in the room. And it's funny because when they're scanning it and they get the results back and they're reporting to Kate, and someone says, yeah, it's life form detected, before they cut to the shot, this is how fast my brain works. And yeah, they haven't. I'm like, well, yeah, it's TARDIS. It is a living thing. There's a old line. I forget what episode it's in. It's in New Who era, in the modern first reboot. Like, again, we got to figure out how to define all the eras now. But the RTD1 era, even though it may have been when Moffat was showrunner, I forget. I forget what episode it's in. I was thinking it may have been somewhere in the end of time where you get some little backstory in the Doctor and the Master. I don't think it's there. I forget what episode it's in. Doesn't really matter. Where the Doctor references the fact that TARDISes are not built, they are grown. Because they are at least semi, or mostly, potentially entirely organic. We really don't know. As in terms of a life form that evolved on Gallifrey, or given what we know now, with some of the Timeless Child stuff, you gotta wonder, did the Gallifreyans actually invent that technology? What's up with... There's a whole bunch of questions that I'm sure people have. But they're questions that exist because we've seen the New Who era run for 12, however many years it ran for. A lot. 15, no, longer than that. Almost 20. Yeah, actually. Not seasons, obviously, but years, because it started in 2005. Although, I need to look this up, or look back on it, just to see if this was done. I don't think it was done intentionally, but it may have just worked out that way. Actually, it did work out that way, age-wise, for the character, for Ruby. But the night of her birth is December 24th, 2004. I'm not sure. I need to go back and look at the end of time again. 10's final episode, because 10 goes on that long tour where he visits like all his major companions at one point in time, and or doesn't visit them, but kind of just checks up on them. Like in case of Martha and Mickey, he doesn't really speak to them, just sees what they're doing in the current time or whatever. I think one of his final stops, though, is to go see Rose. And I know it's around Christmas. I don't know if it's Christmas Day, but it is the year prior. So it is 2004. So I want to go double check because it would be interesting. And I think it's a happy accident. I don't think Davis obviously didn't plan it back then. He had no idea he'd take over the show again later on. But I don't know if it's something retroactive. He did intentionally, or it just, again, happy accident that it works out that Ruby's age, being about 19, 20-ish, is about what general companion age is usually in modern era. So that's what was nice with the Whittaker era. They changed that formula up a little bit with the companions. With Graham, who I actually really liked as a companion. Probably my this is not a knock on Jodie Whittaker, or Chris Chibnall for that matter. One of my favorite parts of the 13th Doctor era was Graham as a companion. I was bummed out when that kind of went away after a little while, because I just enjoyed that dynamic. I thought was fun, something we hadn't really seen in the modern era, at least not consistently seen it like that. So, getting way off topic. Forgot what I was talking about. Sutek will do that to you when they bring it back. Oh, no, I was saying about the whole connection with Ruby's birth potentially being same night, and depending on time zones, roughly maybe even around the same time, because it's snowing when the 10th Doctor goes back to see Rose. Not heavily snowing, but still snowing. Oh, there's a great gag line from way earlier. When they first get in the time window, Ruby and the Doctor, and it starts snowing, and someone makes a comment about, wow, look how clear you can even see the snow. And then the new character they introduced, the 10-year-old, supposed to be like the boy genius at Unit. It's like, yeah, that is impressive. I haven't even turned it on yet. Good throwaway joke. I like that, though. Yeah, and again, all we was made clear by the Doctor is the snow is some indication that whatever happens at that point in time that we explore further in this episode is major and important. Well, we know now why it was important. Because again, wibbly wobbly, timey wimey in terms of the cause and effect, the causality of all this. But as we find out, likely the reason for that was because that future moment in time when they would go in the time window with that tape, make the memory link to the memory of the TARDIS. Hence, like I said, I still think that this is sort of one way or the other. We're gonna see the actual birth and origins of the memory TARDIS. That's exactly what it is. It is a memory and impression of the TARDIS. But it's still, I don't know, very interesting. Yeah, I could cross over a lot of Destiny 2 stuff. Especially the way the sand cloud effect looked reminds me of something very much from a Destiny cinematic from years ago. It's ironic. But anyway, all this is oddly tied together in terms of memory becoming tangible. Blah, blah, it's all similar. Anyway, I've gone on for a long time talking about this episode. Mostly rambling and ranting. Really all you need to know is that, Sutek's back. And I think, from all appearances, again, what surprised me, this was not a longer payoff. And to go back to Ruby's neighbor, flatmate downstairs, missed something, I forget what it was. Who again, I mistakenly thought was part of the whole Susan thing. The actors do look somewhat similar at first glance. I've seen all these episodes once, so forgive me. She clearly knows something. Because when she goes up to see Ruby's grandmother, you can, that way that scene plays out, you can tell something's up with her. Because something about, I don't know if it's the radio or she says something directly about the storm coming. I know the radio does, but I know she has the line of, he waits no more, and they cut to the outside shot of the big dark cloud encroaching over London. I'm like, okay, so we're doing this now then, because it just felt like, since this was something that feels like was getting set up since the first episode of the 60th anniversary specials, I really thought this was going to be a longer term wait and payoff for this character, like for Sutek, or what ended up being Sutek, we know now. Yeah, I'm surprised it happened this early, and will probably be resolved by the end of next week, by next episode. Unless it bleeds. Now, I can't see it bleeding into the Christmas special because Moffat wrote that. So I don't see. If Davies had a story he wanted to keep telling, he would have. Like, if it was like a 3-part thing. And. It's not, though. Like, as big of a deal as this got made into, it's going to get resolved in an episode somehow. Temporarily. Maybe a reoccurring, ongoing thing throughout the 15th Doctor's tenure. We'll see. So I have to stop and count and double check my numbers now because, yeah, 10 came back. 10's also 14. It gets very confusing. And that's not even throwing the War Doctor. And don't even get me started about, I know the previous episode from last week with Rogue and the scanning and the Doctor's faces and the references in there. I know they threw Richard E. Grant in there to reference the animated thing, so now it's like Shadow Canon. It's whatever. It's an Easter egg for fun. Calm down. Some of y'all take your Doctor Who way too seriously. And trust me, it's a good universe. It's fun to connect some dots here and there and figure things out. Like I said, this episode just made me want to go back and rewatch the Pyramids of Mars serial again. Or not even that. I know for a fact, on the Doctor Who YouTube channel, they have a lot of classic Who condensed. Basically, they would take those multi-part serials and kind of just cut them down to like 45 minutes to an hour. Kind of, again, a condensed version of the serial. And I've seen them. Like, I've seen stuff I haven't seen before, and I've also watched the condensed version of what I've seen completely before. I'm like, yeah, pretty good job of like just condensing what would otherwise take several hours to watch a story arc if you can find all the episodes anywhere. So I think Pyramids of Mars is already up there on their YouTube. If not, I guarantee you they put it up today or yesterday with this episode airing. So, because cat's out of the bag now, spoilers wise. Another good reason why it's better I probably waited for Sunday to do this. Some people have more time, and I've ranted on for way too long. All the file uploads now, and all the things I always complain about, first world problems, I know. But hey, I like talking about Doctor Who. And this was a big, massive episode. I thought it had some really good pacing, and, well, kind of yes and no. Early on, again, it felt like, man, this better not just all be a bunch of setup stuff for next, like, not that it annoys me, I'm kind of used to it, with just the way stuff's written. Yeah, I mean, Game of Thrones is always really good about kind of taking that trope and flipping it on its head. Of like, no, our real big episode is actually not the finale. It's the second to last episode. As I mentioned earlier up top, the penultimate episode in Game of Thrones is always the second to last episode before the finale. That's when everything would be a big storyline. And then the finale was largely like fallout from the big event plus setting up the next season. There was a lot of setup, and it was a weird system, but they made it work. Speaking of which, House of Dragons Season 2 starts tonight as I'm recording this. I will be covering that show on a weekly basis. Not huge on Game of Thrones, but I do enjoy the series. I've seen all of the episodes of both the original series and House of Dragon. And this is a good place to announce it, because there's a tangential connection to Doctor Who. Because Matt Smith playing Aegon, Targaryen, so he's one of the leads of the show. So, which is honestly 90% of why I watched the first season. I watched Game of Thrones like pretty much everyone else on the planet when it was airing. But they announced the spinoff, and I'm like, yeah, whatever. They announced the casting, like, oh, Matt Smith's playing one of the leads, and he's playing a villain? Yes, because I know, I've seen his time as the 11th Doctor, always knew that potential for him playing a really good villain was in there. And it's sort of been attempted and then ended up either getting cut or reduced, or a bunch of stories I'm not getting into, other stuff that people I'm sure that are fans know about. Matt Smith fans specifically, like I am, big fan of his acting work. So, yep, I'll be covering that show weekly, probably starting tomorrow. We'll break down episode 1 that airs tonight. So we'll look at that. And yeah, I know it's weird. I'm covering Game of Thrones before I start covering The Acolyte, and I am a huge Star Wars fan. The amount of Star Wars books I own compared to Game of Thrones books is like, I don't know, 20 to 1 or something like that. Because there's not that many Game of Thrones books, so they kind of get to cheat a little bit. And that's not even counting the Legends books, which I don't actually have that many of, which might surprise you. Once the new set's done, my book part of my bookshelf, I'll probably rotate out what's there. Not every video, but occasionally. You'll see some of it. It's a decent sized collection. It needs to grow. I was just at the bookstore a couple weeks back and was looking at a couple of books I want to pick up for Star Wars, so, and catch up on. But I currently have 4 books I need to read still, so. And you'll get reviews for all those books when they're done. 3 of them are hockey related, 1 of them is Halo related, so. Take that for what you will. I need to put Star Wars on my to-do list. I know The Acolyte just aired their 3rd episode. I think they air their stuff on Thursday night. So, yeah, I got to get caught up, like do a little catch-up video, and then start covering that before it ends. I just haven't yet because I didn't know if there were going to be any ties and connections to Tales from the Empire. So I wanted to watch and review that first. So it's been a whole backup of things. And I got Bad Batch Season 3, the entirety of that I got to review and look at. I haven't watched any of it yet. Really behind on stuff. And that's just mentioning Star Wars stuff. Let alone, I've said in another video, other things I plan to cover. Because I am going to have Disney Plus for like 2 months for Doctor Who. There's other stuff on there I need to watch and talk about and cover. Like X-Men 97, I've been hearing nothing but amazing things about. Same with the Star Wars stuff I need to catch up on. But especially The Acolyte. That one I need to really do. Just because my YouTube algorithm knows I am a Star Wars fan, so I have to be very careful right now to avoid spoilers as best I can. So, generally, most people on YouTube are pretty good about that kind of thing with thumbnails and titles. There's usually at least a grace period for spoilers, so of a little bit. But we're starting to approach that time period where that grace period for whatever has been revealed in The Acolyte so far, because I know they did a 2-episode premiere, and the 3rd one aired last week. So I got some catching up to do between now and Thursday. So hopefully between now and then, you'll see a review for that pop up from me from the first 3 episodes. Probably without any context of Tales of the Empire, which I do want to watch and do want to review. And I'm sure there's going to be some connection or tie-in, although I'm hoping Tales of the Empire ties more into the Ahsoka series, but that's a whole other discussion, whole other topic here to talk for Doctor Who. But I have a feeling there's a pretty strong chance there's some crossover there in the fan bases, because they're both huge science fiction franchises. I know I'm not the only one that loves them both. And they're not even the only 2 science fiction franchises I'm a huge fan of. I could list off a bunch of other things that would be here a while. And we're getting close to an hour. I should probably shut up now. Long rant. And, be back next week for the conclusion of the rebooted Doctor Who. Season 1 now. The Disney era, or the RTD 2.0 era. Pick your poison on what you want to call it. But, yep. Whew, boy, this episode was just head-spinningly good. Like I said, I want to go watch it again. Possibly after I go back and watch Pyramid to Mars. Probably the condensed version. I'm sure it's probably up on the YouTube, so I'll go look for it. If I find it, maybe I'll drop it down in the doobly-doo for you fine folks. And yes, there's a reference, an internet reference for some of you. If you know what I'm talking about and referencing with the putting the thing in the doobly-doo, leave a comment if you know what I'm referencing. And I don't often ask for engagement. I never ask for engagement on this channel, actually, because it's not a job. It's a hobby I do for fun. But if you know what I'm talking about, stick it down in the doobly. Yeah. So, stick it below the doobly-doo. You know where that is. So, yeah. All right. Bye. Peace.